It's time for the Volquest podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by Smoky Mountain Organics with Rob Lewis and Austin Price. I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us. Be sure to check out our friends Smoky Mountain Organics online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com, or you can visit them in one of their East Tennessee locations. They've got 4 of those to serve you. If you mention Volquest and an in-store purchase, you'll get 15% off of that purchase. They have locations in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Sevierville, and of course the location in Knoxville is at 8018 Kingston Pike. That is just across from Trader Joe's, and you can check them out at Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store. Plenty to get to on this Tuesday edition of the podcast. We'll start obviously with football and putting a bow tie on the Georgia game. Rob, as you reflected and reviewed upon Tennessee's 41-17 loss, good, bad, and ugly for you in terms of takeaways?
Well, the good, just to start, and we've talked about it all year long, this coaching staff can game plan and scheme some stuff up. And that was pretty apparent in the first quarter. But Tennessee had 159 yards in the first quarter, and I think like 220 something in the next 3. Two drives of 70 plus yards, one for a touchdown, one that stalled in the Georgia 7. I mean, early on, these guys had a plan, and the kids knew it, and they were able to execute it. But then, I think in the SEC, and I wrote this, as the game wears on, Jimmy's and Joe's start to matter a lot more than X's and O's. And, I think Kirby Smart and his staff made a couple of adjustments. And Georgia's, you wrote this in your 10 things. You could just see the talent gap at places and guys not being able to get guys on the ground. And Georgia averaged 6.7 yards a carry. Tennessee averages 3.2. That's about kids. That's not about scheme.
If you had said before the season it was going to be Solon Page matched up with,
Zamir White.
Well, no, not Zamir White. James Cook out there wide. I don't think anybody was taking Solon Page in that one.
In a crazy question, obviously Tennessee has done good things, got a chance to win 7 games here, and that speaks for itself. Should Tennessee fans take as much encouragement from, or more encouragement from the 7 wins, or nearly as much encouragement from the fact that they put up, 300 some odd yards against Georgia, put up more yards than anybody did. They're in the ball game with Alabama in the second half. Which do you take if you're a Tennessee fan? Do you take more encouragement from beating Missouri team? It's not very good. South Carolina team not very good. Or the fact that you played Alabama the way you did, and you did as much against Georgia with this roster as anybody else has done against Georgia in the SEC.
Not answer your question, but I would take it all as positive. You're beating the teams you're supposed to beat. That's a huge win. As someone told me, on Monday, feels a lot like Kiffin's year. Now Tennessee was more competitive on the whole against, they beat Georgia, and more competitive against Florida and Bama in 2009. But, the dominance like that Georgia is and Alabama is, they are way more dominant now than they were in 2009. And then of course, Florida has really kind of been terrible after they lost or after they beat Tennessee. But, on the whole, it does remind you kind of a lot that year. I think Kiffin probably had a few more weapons than Josh has, but he's made it work, especially on defense, all things considered. And as Rob said, they've drawn up plays in the dirt and executed them. Again, Tennessee going 7-5, and doing it the way they've done it, I think it's a real feather in Josh Heupel's cap.
I'm on the same, but you can't worry about competing with Georgia until you establish that you're a better program than South Carolina, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. You got to start there and take baby steps. And I think Josh Heupel did that. He beat the 4 SEC teams that you absolutely must beat if you're Tennessee's head coach. You worry about the big 3, but you got to lay a foundation. You got to be better than those 4 teams that Tennessee has always and forever been better than, and he was this year.
So Tennessee, you got 2 games left. South Alabama, you got Vanderbilt. You're going to be favored to win both. Any chance South Alabama is a trap game of any kind
No.
for Tennessee?
I don't think so. I think, this is a chance for some of these guys to play their way up in the draft some more. This is a game that, some of the young guys can continue to make some plays. So, no, I think this team, as you pointed out in the Monday afternoon 2-minute drill, like they've not had that lull game. So, no, I think that they're very motivated to finish this out 7-5 because I think they know and they hear the chatter. Kids listen and kids hear those type of things that, you get to 7-5, the fans make you already more attractive. We'll see where they go bowling if they can get to 7-5.
Rob, is this just the case because you were so bad last year and last year was just such a miserable at times experience that you just want to line up and play if you're Tennessee, regardless of who the opponent is?
I mean, I don't think it's all. I mean, I think that factors in for sure. But I mean, I think they like playing for this staff. I mean, I think not just the personalities, but the brand of football. And I mean, if you're Salon Page or Aaron Beasley, and you've basically been lucky to be on some special teams for the past 3 years. I mean, you're chomping at the bit to get out there. Cedric Tillman, I mean, good gracious. I can't wait for Saturday to get here every week. No, I mean, I think these kids are having fun. I mean, I really do. And I know from talking to people in AP, I'm sure you had the same thing. I mean, they went into that game Saturday legit thinking they could win. I mean, they weren't like, let's keep it close. Let's see if we can get into the fourth quarter. I mean, they legit went into that game thinking they had a shot.
Well, I mean, Heupel, that's how he thinks. I mean, he doesn't believe in conceding anything. I mean, remember when, back when, Bama, Tennessee was getting ready to roll with Bama with no Cade and several things. I mean, I know, Heupel made reference to a few people like, we're not conceding anything. This is, we're going to go in there and we're going to, coach them up and scheme it up and see what happens. And nobody's expecting us to win, but that's why we play the game. And so, I think that's just kind of how he approaches every game. And I think he'll approach these next two like he's playing Georgia and Alabama again. I mean, he knows he's not, but I mean, I think that, from a, keeping them the pedal down and keeping them focused, I think that, he'll hold them to the same standard he did the last 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, I know he told some people going into Bama, we're going to score some points. I mean, I don't know how many stops we'll get, if we get enough stops, so we'll score some points against Alabama. And I think they felt like it was going to be a little harder to score points against Georgia, but they felt like they certainly had a chance, going into this game. Why is this team, is it because of tempo, Rob, and is it because of scheme that they've just been able to scheme people up? Is that why they've been so good to start games? I mean, you've covered a lot of Tennessee teams, and I have as well. I mean, there have been some teams where you go, you know what? They got a lot of weapons. They can score. I've never seen one be this dynamic offensively out of the gate. Like there's no filling out process for what the defense is doing. It is straight. We're dictating to you what we do, and we're going to score out of the gate. I mean, they scored 150 points in the first quarter. They may have a chance to score 200 points in the first quarter this season, which is just a crazy number.
But I think the pace is part of it because I don't know if you wrote this or said it the other night, but I mean, I think teams obviously practice all week for it, and it's a point of emphasis. But I don't think you can really replicate it until you get out there and see the opposing offense is lined up with 33 seconds left on the play clock, ready to go again. So I think that takes some adjustment. But I mean, I mean, when you say scheme, I think it's more about play calling. I mean, obviously the scheme is a part of it, play calling within the scheme. But Heupel and his offensive staff just, from film study, come up with stuff that they feel like they can attack and getting it done. I mean, second play of the game Saturday, he drew up a touchdown. I mean, and I guarantee you that was something that he saw where they can manipulate coverage with formation or motion or something like that, and they were going to take a shot. I mean, it was out. Obviously I didn't see every defensive snap Georgia play, but I wonder if anybody's been that wide open. And I mean, that was Needles Jones walks in with that football.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't a step on somebody; he was yards on somebody.
He was unaccounted for.
I mean, it's been that way, Austin, all season long. And we talked about it early in the year when they weren't connecting on things. They're like, hey, they're getting people open. it's every week they're getting people open, particularly in the first quarter. I mean, I think that's, if I'm a fan, that's the most impressive thing and the most encouraging thing that I've seen is that every week there's just early in the game, guys are wide open.
Yeah, I mean, you can't replicate, the tempo they play with. I thought Georgia must have practiced it like at some crazy warp level. I would love to have seen film of their practice because they actually tried to substitute, and sometimes they were able to get them on there really quick, and do that. But I mean, what Tennessee's done early in the game, with their tempo and just kind of how they get it rolling, if they can avoid penalties and really win first down, like that's when teams just have no chance. I mean, like that's when, if they win first down, most drives are going past the 50, if not into the end zone.
Does Tennessee run the football more these last 2 weeks? I mean, I was looking this up earlier today. They've got 2 games this year where the tailbacks have combined for 30 carries. Now, I think we all feel like Tyon Evans is probably not going to play, may not play the rest of the year, but not going to be available this week. But is this a game, Rob, where you take a little off of Hendon Hooker's legs and you line up and you run the football with the running backs and try to get a little more balance than we've seen the last few weeks?
I try to, just because, I mean, Tennessee's not going to win the championship or anything, but you can lose a bowl game against a quality opponent if you lose your quarterback for the year. And Tennessee's not been able to protect the passer against anybody. And, they've given up 11 sacks in the last 2 weeks. And to me, for that reason, I'm running the footballs. But if I'm having success, I'm going to stick with that quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that you're going to see them run the football because I think Josh Heupel knows they need to show a little bit more of that. They need to show a little bit more balance. What that running back rotation looks like next year, who's there, what they do in the running back room is going to be interesting to watch, and kind of where they are these last couple of weeks at running back. Austin is going to be, I think, a little bit of a storyline to see who gets work, who doesn't get work. Do they find somebody besides 2 guys in terms of it being Jabari Small and Jalen Wright?
Here's the thing. Early in the year, Tyon's got it going. Jalen Wright showed flashes all through spring and fall. And Tennessee's going to take 1 running back. And now I think there's a chance they take 3 running backs in this class.
Woo.
I really think that you're looking at a total rework of that room. So again, how much things change from the beginning of the year to the end of the year just on the field dictates how you handle recruiting and how you recruit a certain position a certain way. So, that room, needs to find some type of stability. You know what you're getting in Jabari Small. Jalen Wright is, really quick and really solid when they hand him the ball, but he's got to be better as a pass protector. Or he'll never see the field. That's something
he's going to have to get some lead in his rear end. I mean, he's going to have to get stronger. And I mean, he's a freshman. I'm not saying anything.
Sure.
But he cannot just in this conference and in college football, and this is what you're saying, he can't just rely on speed and quickness.
That's right. So I mean, I just think that running back room is going to look vastly different 2 months from now.
Yeah, and again, you don't want to take anything away from the opponents because Tennessee's got a chance to win both these games. They need to go take care of their business. How much in your mind is these last 2 weeks an evaluation for some young guys? I mean, if they can get to young guys earlier in games, do they need to do that, Rob, so that they can evaluate what recruiting needs they have, what the transfer world might or might not look like for them? I mean, is there a little bit of that more so than earlier in the year? Hey, if we can get to a rotation of some young guys, let's get to them if we're not planning on redshirt.
I mean, it would be for me. I don't know if they think that way, though. Do you? I mean, I think it might. I don't know if they go in thinking that, but it probably is a result of game film. You know what I mean? Like, it may not be a goal going into the game, but it may be a byproduct after the fact where they are able to get a look at some guys. I don't know about you guys. It's not sexy, but I'd love to get a look at some of those young offensive linemen, like Reggie Perry, like James Robinson, just to see if Tennessee has any potential there. Because, after playing the number 1 and 2 teams in the country, that's my biggest takeaway by far, is the difference in the line of scrimmage between Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. I mean, Tennessee has put up some big rushing numbers this year, 200 plus for the season. They had 66 against Bama. They had 50 against Georgia. And Bama and Georgia both had 200 plus. I mean, I think that's where it shows up. Skill positions are fun to talk about. Quarterbacks are great, but you got to have some big boys that can move other big boys in this league. Tennessee doesn't have enough of them.
Well, they don't really have any depth on the O-line. And then, they're going to have a portion of that line back next year, but they need to start finding out, is there anybody on this roster that can fill Cade May's shoes? Can Jeremiah Crawford get it done? Can it be, RJ Perry, who can get out there and play right tackle and do it effectively? I'm with Rob. I mean, at some point, you got to start getting some of these guys some real run and see what they can do. I felt like in games where Tennessee was up by a bunch, they've kept their starters in too long, whether it be guys in the secondary, Hendon Hooker, whatever. I just feel like Saturday is set up for a game, potentially, especially if you handle your business early on, to get a lot of those guys at all positions, whether it be like the Ruckers in the secondary or Brandon Turnage or Kamal Haddon or Aaron Willis at linebacker, get some of those guys a lot of playing time.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee played 14 people in the front seven on Saturday. I mean, that's not a lot of bodies. I mean, I'd say Georgia probably played 14 people on the defensive line, and Tennessee played 14 in the front seven. They've clearly got to develop some depth. That's the key moving forward for this program, to build off what they've done this year. Speaking of building that depth, Austin, you do that through recruiting. Tennessee had a few guys in town, an official visitor, several unofficial visitors. You had a chance to visit with some guys. Start with some of the unofficial visitors first, okay? Let's talk about the Pierce kid, the Williams kid at tailback, some of those big name guys. What's your takeaway from Tennessee with where they are with some of those guys?
Well, I think for James Pierce, right now it's kind of a Tennessee-Georgia thing. Would Georgia take him? I don't know. I mean, and then two, is he content to go down there and sit? Because he's got a much better chance to play here early than he does at Georgia. Flip it to Justin Williams. Tennessee, to me, has ascended themselves to be the leader there. It's not done, but Tennessee has really quickly rose. And quite frankly, he told me, hey, man, I want to go where I'm wanted, and Tennessee made him feel like the most important recruit in the house Saturday, all day long. So Tennessee is quickly, went from 0 to 60 in that one. And he's a good looking kid, man. Well put together. About 6 foot, about 205. Flipping it to a couple other guys that were in town, Amari Jackson from Eagles Landing down in Georgia. I think Tennessee did themselves a lot of good there on Saturday. Demario Tolan. Tolan's going to take the long view. He's going to go back to LSU after they hire a coach. I mean, that Tennessee's in a good spot there because right now he's coming off the visit high. Even though it was an unofficial visit, he's coming off the visit high. Where are they at 2 weeks from now?
You think Tolan still signs early?
That's his plan. He's supposed to be a midtermer.
Okay. That's a quick turnaround depending on how fast LSU goes with hiring a coach, and maybe LSU goes quicker. I still contend that LSU is going to make Jimbo Fisher tell him no, and maybe Jimbo Fisher can get.
Did you see how much he tripled down on Monday? Good Lord.
He did, and again, and he may have told him no, and he may tell him completely no. I just think LSU has got to start to move in some direction pretty quickly here, or they're going to be in trouble, because that window is going to get tight for them in terms of getting guys down there to see them for visits and figure out whether they're putting a staff together and all those things. Is that going
to be his lane or his Nick Saban type moment when Nick just like, I'm not going? It's like,
you bring up a great point, Huber. The December signing window has really put pressure on you when you're making a coaching change.
Well,
it's a different ball game.
I think it puts pressure on you to make a decision on who your coach is going to be, particularly if you go out early like LSU did and make it known that you're making a change. And then at the flip side, if you're Florida, you're going to have to make a decision pretty quick on what you're going to do with Dan Mullen. You can't wait 2 or 3 weeks after the season and evaluate that thing. You got to go one way or the other with whatever you're going to do, with Dan Mullen. It's going to make for a really interesting first part of December with some guys that I think Tennessee has a chance with and is going to be involved with as quote, that silly season comes quickly. with a very short window because of the recruiting world. Austin, in a kind of a final recruiting question, everybody wants to know, Walter Nolan was at the game. Any big takeaway from there, or other than, hey, he made that visit there? We'll see if he makes an official visit to Tennessee or not.
Yeah, I said on the board, it just doesn't feel like there's much traction there. He came over, he checked the box, but it just doesn't feel like much traction going on right now. It could change 2 weeks from now. It's Walter, but just based off what I'm hearing, it feels like it was more of a check the box thing than it was anything else.
And that makes the junior college recruitment of the defensive tackle from Independence,
Jeffrey Mba.
Isn't he French? Isn't he a French guy?
He is. We
and makes him a priority, I think, when you look at where the depth is on the defensive line, and they need a guy to come in and make an impact and play early. So we'll see where Rodney Gardner.
They're going to make Tom Sakoviak come over for all of his press availabilities because he had to handle Yves Pons.
He handled Yves extremely well, as Yves learned his French when he was in town, for sure. Speaking of the Tennessee basketball team, Rob Lewis, they looked more like what you thought the Tennessee basketball team would look like against the ETSU and manhandling them. And now it gets real serious for the Tennessee basketball team in a hurry. Villanova on Saturday, and then North Carolina and Purdue on Sunday. Litmus test, I guess, is the best way to say it this week, right?
Yeah, we'll find. I mean, early season measuring stick for Tennessee for sure. And I'm as interested as anybody. But I think I haven't seen the rankings. We're taping this on Monday. I don't know. I'd imagine they inched up a little bit from 17 in one poll and 18 in the other. But I personally think they're a little underrated. Just, competition hasn't been great, but man, they're deep. Volquest getting back on Sunday, I think, was big to get him a game. And Kennedy Chandler, maybe, I don't know about as good as maybe better than advertised. SEC Freshman of the Week just looks. I'm not surprised by the talent. I've seen him enough. But the maturity, the poise that he plays with is really impressive.
And I like the fact that Rick Barnes is starting to lay on the defense, right? He doesn't play nearly good enough defense. That's going to be the bell cow for Rick, because there's not anything you can really be critical of Kennedy Chandler's offensive game about at this point, but he is going to be pretty relentless on the defensive end of the floor about him.
Somebody, and this is a testament to Kennedy. Kids weed themselves out. If you're a prima donna with a big ego, I don't care how good of a player you are, you're not going to. You're not going to pick Tennessee. It's going to be obvious early in the process that it's not the place for you. And Kennedy has none of that. I mean, he would be justified in having an ego and expecting a little special treatment. And there is none of that with him. As somebody around the program told me last week that Kennedy Chandler had gotten the Jordan Bone treatment for a week, which if you saw Tennessee practice when Bone was here, that was not a fun week for Kennedy Chandler. And I mean, he could just take it. And a lot of kids, especially freshmen, cannot. And I think you're going to see him get better and better because of that, because he's getting coached hard and he's okay with it.
All right, so Villanova is really good, fourth-ranked team in the country. They've impressed. Where is Tennessee defensively? And look, let's make it clear: you better not be playing your best basketball this time of year. If you do, you're not going to have a very good basketball season. So the upside for this Tennessee team is high. The growth that this team needs to take is obviously pretty significant, particularly on the defensive end. What worries you most about Tennessee defensively right now, Rob? Is it post defense, rim protector? Is it keeping the ball in front of you on the perimeter with straight line drives?
For me, it's rim protection, because even if Jonas Adu, gets himself back in shape after missing 2.5-3 weeks of practice and is a member of the rotation, he's not going to play 18-20 minutes a game, and he's your best rim protector. He might play some, but he's not going to really change who you are defensively. So for me, it's handling elite size, and there's not a lot of that on the schedule, but there will be. If you want to get where you want to go in March, you're going to be able to handle elite size. And I don't mean just with rim protection, but keeping people off the backboards. And I'll say this about this is not something I would notice. Like a smart basketball person would have to tell me this. And I talked with ETSU head coach Des Oliver yesterday and after the game. And he was raving about Kennedy Chandler, which he did on the record, his post-game comments. And he did, same story off the record. But the second thing he was most impressed with was John Fulgerson's ball screen defense, and which is again is not something I would take away from first watch. Somebody would need to point that out to me. And he said it was elite, as good as anybody, in the country. From what he and then he kind of illuminated to me how much that helped Tennessee in other areas, how much it helped other guys when you had a big who could come out on the perimeter, handle the ball screen, recover, and not make you shift and adjust. And I think there's kind of some subtle things like that going on defensively on the roster with some of the veterans. I think Olivier is kind of in that same category. Josiah for sure is in that same category. I think this is going to be a really good defensive team, but as we go on, but rebounding would be my biggest concern when they start getting up against the other elite programs.
Do you think that's where they get exposed most this weekend, is on the rebounding end?
I'll see. I mean, because you're starting a big man in Fulke he does a ton of things well, but he is not an elite rebounder. That's kind of, he can get shoved off his spots. Guys can move him. Olivier is 6'8". I mean, he's not the biggest guy. So, you got to be a good rebounding team. But what I mean, Josiah's got to come down and get 6 or 7. Justin Powell, when he's on the floor as a 6'7" wing, has got to get in there and mix it up, because a lot of nights you're going to be outmatched in the post with Fulke and Olivier.
All right, last thing. I mean, offensively, this team's got a lot of weapons. What can they do to expose teams, quality teams this weekend?
I think just spread them out. I mean, wow. I mean, you can't stay in front of Kennedy. I don't care who you are. You cannot stay in front of Kennedy Chandler. He's going to collapse you. And Tennessee can put shooters around him. I mean, Olivier's only made he's 3 for 3 from 3. I mean, just the fact that you have to guard him out there creates space. Josiah doesn't shoot it great, but he shoots it well enough. Santiago can be a sniper. Justin Powell can be a sniper. I just think opening the floor up and letting Kennedy play is where Tennessee can expose people, because he's not as big as a minute, and he is an elite finisher for a kid his size. That's offensively, that may be the most impressive thing about him, is how he is able to either take or avoid contact in close quarters and finish on layups. I mean, it's everybody just pay attention to that. I mean, it's a subtle skill, and he is really good at it. But yep. I think floor spacing and shooting number is where Tennessee can really get after some people.
Well, everybody should enjoy every minute that Kennedy Chandler plays on this basketball team this fall, because he's going to be fun to watch this fall and winter. But everybody around the country is certainly taking note of that. Big weekend for Tennessee basketball. We'll have more on the hoops balls throughout the week. And then obviously it's a big week for Tennessee on the football front, an opportunity to get bowl eligible as they host South Alabama. We'll have full coverage of Tennessee football and recruiting all week long as well. That's going to do it for this edition of the Smoky Mountain Organics Podcast. For Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest Podcast every week here on Volquest.